It's a well-known monument in the capital of Argentina. The obelisk has been the scene of soccer celebrations, political rallies, amassed by Pope John Paul II. And an idea that dates back to its construction in 1936 has just come to fruition. There's a new way for visitors to get most of the way up the 221-foot-high landmark in Buenos Aires. Until now, that was done by climbing a narrow staircase through the hollow building. But an elevator whose construction started just last year and wrapped up just last month makes the ascent a lot faster. It wasn't easy to build because there's not a lot of space to work with inside. The project's architect says the elevator had to be prefabricated in a factory, disassembled into parts, squeezed in the monument through a narrow door, and then reassembled inside the obelisk. And tourists who take the lift still reportedly have to climb a few dozen steps on their own to get to the viewing platform. Once they're there, though, the view of Buenos Aires is towering. I'm Carl Azus. This is the world from A to Z. Thanks for taking some time to hang out with us this Tuesday. Many investors in America and abroad were in good moods yesterday following progress on trade negotiations between the world's two biggest economies. Those countries are the U.S. and China. When he took office in January, U.S. President Donald Trump said his government would tariff or tax other countries to bring in revenue and, quote, protect American workers. And those tariffs have heavily involved Chinese goods in particular. The two countries have put new back-and-forth taxes on imports from each other that threaten to raise prices on a lot of their trade. However, officials from the two rivals met in Switzerland over the weekend, and they announced that for at least 90 days, American tariffs on many Chinese goods would be reduced from 145% to 30%, and Chinese tariffs on many American goods would be reduced from 125% to 10%. The U.S. imports far more from China than it exports to China. Several media organizations called the talks a major step for the two countries, and both nations agree it's an important one. Negotiations continue over what happens after the 90-day period.
Word out. What U.S. state is home to the oldest airport in the world? California, Maryland, New York, North Carolina. In operation since 1909, College Park Airport is considered to be the world's oldest. It's located in the state of Maryland.
Radar outages, shortages of air traffic controllers, and equipment problems have been blamed for numerous issues that have popped up recently at U.S. airports.
After another air traffic control equipment outage, the Federal Aviation Administration implemented a ground stop for Newark Liberty International Airport-bound flights Sunday morning. This comes after a 90-second-long radar and radio outage last Friday at the Philadelphia-based TRACON facility, handling flights departing from or arriving at Newark. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says it's still safe to fly into Newark.
I fly out of Newark all the time. My family flies out of Newark. And just when we saw these two incidents, when we have issues, there are policies and procedures in place for controllers and for pilots. They know what to do.
All while admitting many systems air traffic controllers use are old.
The Congress and the country haven't paid attention to it, right? They expect it to work. And so now I think the lights are blinking, the sirens are turning, and they're saying, listen, we have to fix this, because what you see in Newark is going to happen in other places across the country.
The FAA also issued a ground stop for some flights bound for Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport due to a runway equipment issue, separate from the issue impacting Newark. More than 50% of flights were delayed at the Atlanta airport Sunday, according to the website FlightAware. Former Transportation Department Inspector General Mary Schiavo says aging technology has been a concern for years, and the expense is rising.
Congress has said they are giving them an initial budget of something like 12.5 or 15 billion. That's the tip of the iceberg.
In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez.
On this date in world history, the United States declared war war on Mexico on this date in 1846. The Mexican-American War lasted 2 years and eventually expanded U.S. territory by more than 500,000 square miles. On May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II survived an assassination attempt in Vatican City by escaped Turkish prisoner Ali Agca. The leader of the Catholic Church later visited Agca in prison and forgave him. Decades later, after his release, Agca laid flowers at the tomb of the late pontiff. And a British mom and mountaineer made history on this date in 1995. Alison Hargreaves became the first woman to climb Mount Everest without oxygen or help from Sherpas, local Tibetan guides. The 33-year-old reached the summit of Pakistan's K2 mountain 3 months later, but died in a massive storm on her way back down. Of all the places we've taken you to on this show, the powder room was not on my list. But the term has a fascinating history of its own. It's less about bathroom humor and more about this.
Nowadays, powder room just refers to a small bathroom, usually with only a toilet and a sink, unlike a full bathroom, which includes a tub or shower. And the powder room is often in an accessible part of the home, so guests can use it without entering private rooms. But back in the 1500s, a powder room was a very literal name for that room, a place you would go to powder your nose, or your wig. Adding powder gave wigs a fresh, off-white look. The powdery substance varied, but most often it was ground up clay, chalk, or flour. Wigs have been around for thousands of years and had various purposes. In ancient Egypt, they protected people's heads from the hot desert sun. The Greeks and Romans used wigs as both a fashion statement and a way to cover greasy, smelly hair. England's Queen Elizabeth I owned more than 80 bright red wigs. But it was King Louis XIII of France that really put wigs in the spotlight. He popularized them out of necessity. At the age of 23, he was already going bald. At that time, having a full head of well-groomed hair was a sign of wealth and power. And as king, Louis didn't want to seem vulnerable in front of his subjects, so he picked out a very opulent wig. His example kicked off a fashion craze. The bigger the wig, the more money you appeared to have. That's where we got the phrase bigwig. The bigwigs in a company are the top decision makers, who also make the most money. British Parliament passed the Duty on Hair Powder Act, which required people who weren't members of the royal family, the military, or the clergy to buy a certificate in order to buy wig powder. It cost the equivalent of $130 today. People didn't want to pay, and it ultimately ended wig fashion. And now, a powder room is a vintage phrase that's almost entirely disappeared with a poof.
What day is it?
The celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County inspired today's holiday. On May 13th, National Frog Jumping Day recalls Mark Twain's famous short story and raises awareness about these amazing amphibians.
Nicknamed the Battle-Born State because it joined the Union in 1864 during the Civil War, Nevada is our first stop today. It's where Mr. Cox's class is watching from Clark County School District. Great to see y'all in Las Vegas. Next is the Bay State of Massachusetts. Wareham High School is the home of the Vikings, and we've got some online in Mr. Barros's class in Wareham. There's a famous Kansas City in 2 states, but it's the one in the Show Me State where you'll find Russell Jones Education Center. Mrs. Longhoose's class is in the Show Me State of Missouri, and from Bixby, Oklahoma, the Sooner State. We welcome the Spartans of Bixby North Intermediate. Mrs. Works' class is there and awesome like Fridays. Another reason to ask who is it before opening your door to visitors. This guy recently stopped by a home in Fort Myers, Florida. Undeterred by the chair it picked up, the animal appears to try to enter through the front door. Thankfully, the only people who answered were police officers and a gator trapper, who eventually caught the rascally reptile, loaded it onto a pickup truck, and gave it a free ride out of the neighborhood. The visitor might have been wearing a smile and dressed up in fine leather just to cover his guile, all the while planning something vile if he can dial up or rile up a few potential victims to pile up. He'll flash his rows of teeth that he just happened to file up, show off his rows of scales that he just happened to style up, but keep the door shut and don't you dare take the bait, or that's one hater you don't want to see later, alligator. I'm Carl Azus, and that's a wrap for the world from A to Z. Means the world to have you watching.